Hello and welcome to the Age of Sunbros YouTube channel. We are back with another Civilization Spotlight, and we are very, very excited to have a very special guest here with us today, and that is SoldieR. Now, if you are unfamiliar with SoldieR, he has been around in the community a long time. He has just been, just a pretty high-end player, I would say. I think you've gone past the 2K ELO mark at various points, and you've been in the pro scene, and he's got his own YouTube channel. We'll be linking it. I doubt anybody who's here has not heard of SoldieR or, has been, following his YouTube channel as well. Big time content creator here. So we are so fortunate to have him lend his expertise on the Dutch civilization. Hey, welcome in. How you doing today?
Hey, what's up, guys? And thanks for having me. Yeah, I've been pretty high level for quite a while now. I kind of got to a point where it's hard for me to get any higher, but I can definitely reach 2K if I really put my mind to it. But just overall, love the game. So glad to be here and help out any new players.
Yeah, we're excited for that. And I get the feeling that you basically main Dutch. It's kind of hard to say whether or not, like, what exactly is your main. I know that you've done some Dutch videos though in the past. So would you say this is probably your main, your best one, or?
Yeah, it's actually, I think right now I don't really have a main because I try to make videos and be a little bit different with the civs I play. But in the last few years, Dutch has definitely been the one I enjoy the most and found the most interesting. So I probably started off as a Germany main way back in the day, but yeah, I think Dutch is my favorite civ right now.
Perfect. Okay, well, let's hop right in then. So, let's say new player comes along. Hey, I don't know anything about this civ. Tell me, and this should be pretty easy talking about the Dutch you and I know, but, just for the people out there that are maybe, brand spanking new, what exactly sets the Dutch apart from other civs in the game?
Yeah, so Dutch is actually one of the more unique original civs, the original 8, and that's for a couple very distinct differences. The villagers, instead of costing food, cost coin, which completely changes your early game macro and how you herd your deer and just set up your early game economy. And then typically don't build the banks until you're in transition to the second age, but that is the main part of their economy. It's very difficult to play Dutch without banks, so it's basically essential, and you really start getting into the bank building right around the 3 or 4 minute mark, depending on how quickly you're aging up, and then you want to follow up with at least a couple more within the next few minutes.
Okay, gotcha. So the big thing are those two center things. Can you tell me, what is a bank? What do you mean bank building?
Good point. Yeah, so a bank is a building that costs 350 food, 350 wood. It actually has changed the cost a little bit throughout the patches, but for the most part, it's always been those resources. And it gathers I believe it's 2.75 coin per second, which is equivalent to about 4 villagers if you take into account placer mines upgrade, which most civs will get early in the game. So yeah, it's about 4 villagers, and it's just a constant trickle of coin, and will go on for the entire game until that building is destroyed. So it's good for the early game to get a boost of economy while you don't have any other shipments, and then it's of course good later in the game when all the mines are running out on the map, and it's very hard to come by resource. So it's, yeah, very good building, a staple of the civilization.
Gotcha. So would you say that the Dutch are really strong late game because they'll get, a max amount of settlers, or merchants in this case is what they're called, and they'll have full banks? Or is there
Yeah, well, that's actually, yeah, I'll go ahead and discuss that a little bit. So that's another point about their settlers, their merchants is what they're called for Dutch, and you can only get to 50 of them. So that is something that holds them back a little bit, or at least contains their economy, because it would get totally out of control if you could have 100 villagers and 7 or 8 banks. But you couldn't be a strong late game. I guess there's different types of late game. If you're talking about a fast and industrial, I don't consider that late game. But if you're in a prolonged H2 or H3 game where mines are starting to run out and you don't yet have factories, that's when Dutch can really shine, the late H3 primarily. but they're still very strong in an early industrial game. And if you can still ship both of your factories, which are basically stronger banks, you get more gold or whatever resource you want to put it on per second. So, yeah, banks are, you can kind of refer to banks as mini factories.
Okay. Yeah, interesting. So, and we'll get into like unique units and all those other mechanics, but for anybody watching, core thing, 50 merchants, 50 settlers, right? And you build banks. And so everything's going to center around banks. So, I guess, would you say, Soldier, that like the Dutch kind of excel maybe like since they kind of have an easier macro just because of the banks, they kind of want to turtle up. They don't have to worry so much about map control. Would you call them like an approachable Civ in that case for new players, or would you say that that adds just another layer of difficulty and maybe they're not as the most approachable Civ in your opinion?
I think they're a little bit on the more difficult side, just because you're kind of predictable in that a lot of players will know if they know Dutch as like their opposing civ, they'll know what you're going to go for like three or four banks pretty much from the start of the game, so they don't have to worry about scouting too much or finding out something that's unpredictable. But there are options for Dutch to kind of switch it up. The main thing for Dutch players is to make sure you have enough hunt in your base. So one of the things, if you're starting off as Dutch, that you want to focus on in the pretty early game, like before the 8-minute mark, you want to make sure you have at least an entire hunt that you're herding towards your base, and sometimes two, because that can really be the thing, because people will try to contain you and food starve you. And so if you can manage to herd a couple hunts into your base, that can really put you in a good position.
Sweet. Okay, good to know. Well, let's go ahead and just dive into the Civ then. I think that's a good intro that we have. I have a test deck here. It's totally blank for you. Think of yourself as an artist, and this is the blank canvas. And we're going to go and get into picking your mind about exactly how to build a good starting universal land deck when I'm first starting out with the Dutch. So we are in Age 1. What are my mandatory cards here?
Yeah, so you definitely have to have your three merchants, which is pretty much three villagers. You can have that as pretty much a staple in any civilization deck. It's just a safe way to play, and you don't want to get behind early in the game, so that's pretty much going to be your go-to card. There's a couple other cards that you can send, or you can have in your deck for a longer term game where you expect to stay in either Age 2 or Age 3, depending on your playstyle. And that's the bank cards over on the right side there. I don't know their exact name. I think Bank of Amsterdam. Yep, that one, and the other one, Bank of Rotterdam, which allows you to build an additional bank and increases your merchant build limit by 5. So those aren't cards you're going to want to send early in the game, but they can help you out later in the game, especially if it's like I said, staying in Age 3 for quite a while.
Gotcha. So that's my next question, is that some Dutch decks you see these, and then other ones are probably a little bit more aggressive or have other unit cards, because obviously these are taking up slots. So how do you feel about these cards, and how do you build out your decks personally on whether to include both of them or one of them or none of them?
I personally, and there's actually one other card. It's just to the left of those, which is the extra speed for halberdiers.
Ooh, yeah.
So that's again situational. These are situational cards. I typically will just focus on having the three merchants, but again, it depends on your playstyle, and which is kind of nice with Dutch. You can go for a fast industrial, or you can build your deck into a more early game. Like I've actually recently had a game and a video I made out of it where I used that military reforms card as well as the advanced arsenal card to get some really speedy help. So it kind of how you want to play the game. That's why it's good to have multiple decks if you want to have some fun with some fast helps.
Ooh, okay. So something to keep in mind for everybody, all the folks at home watching. I'm going to remove the military reforms card, if only because
Yeah.
I love that. I do love that card. Logistician, Age Up, and all that. And we'll get into it, but just so you know, Soldier's top tips. This is definitely a good pick. We'll keep these in the deck, but understand that again, all these three are kind of optional. The only mandatory one being the three merchants. Anything else in Age 1 that you kind of want to give an honorable mention to before we move on?
No, I don't think there's anything I really utilize too much in Age 1. My Dutch might be considered more standard, so that might be the reason for that. But I think when you're learning a civ, you kind of want to learn the standard way first, so it's probably best to leave it as is there.
Gotcha. Well, just for the sake of my curiosity, then I'll ask, what are your opinions on the Dutch East India Company card and all the videos that we saw a couple of months ago about, really aggressive envoy building 5 banks early, super greedy. I don't know if you saw those videos.
I actually did not, but it says banks cost less. I mean, 15%. I mean, I would have to do the math on that, but in my instincts are telling me that it's just not worth it because the villager seconds you lose out on for having not sent 3 merchants, it because yeah, I would have to do the math on that, but my instincts are telling me no.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, there was a bunch of Lionheart videos back in the day. Not back in the day, I mean like maybe a month or two ago, where it's like
Okay.
Envoy puts down 5 banks, age 1, age 2, and I think they do a town militia thing. You know what I mean? And they go industrial,
Okay.
and then it was a whole thing.
I could see that being interesting if you want to make, because you can make envoys from your explorer now, so you could basically have 3 or 4 villagers, extra villagers,
Right,
building
right.
those. It's again like one of those extra decks you would want to have just to have some fun. I don't think that's really gonna be something that can make it into the meta as a strong play, but sounds fun.
Okay, cool. All right, got it. So from the man himself there. So in case you're watching Lionheart videos and you're like, "This is how I want to play," why don't you watch this one first and listen to SoldieR? He'll guide you right. All right, we're moving over into age
Hey,
2.
Lionheart's a great player. He beats me quite often. We trade games, so he has a lot of unique strategies. So maybe he's onto something there.
Maybe. Okay, so age 2. So now we got a lot more to play with. What do you think is standard?
Yep. So your first 2 cards you're gonna send in almost every game is gonna be in one order or the other. Is gonna be 700 wood and then 1 bank wagon. So those are the definite cards you need in pretty much every deck unless you're just being silly. And then of course 700 coin as well. And 600 wood is a card that you will send pretty often. And then 8 pikemen is very useful, even though it sounds like they're weak units and you don't typically want to send them. They don't have the most value. They can come in handy in many situations, especially if you need to pop them out of the TC or just need to add to your composition to hold off on some cavalry. They're super useful in a lot of situations. I think one of the more underrated cards in H2 for Dutch. And it's also a good card to queue up if you're expecting pressure, if you're like aging to H3.
Mm-hmm.
But you can always cancel that if you're not getting the pressure you anticipated. So
Okay.
another card also necessary is 3 Hussar. And another card that you can have in all your decks because it's so useful is I'm not sure on the name of it. It's the unique church card. Is it religious?
Yeah, religious freedom.
Reform? Religious freedom. Okay.
All right, let's talk a little bit about
Yeah,
religious
and
freedom then, since we're on it. What does this do for me?
So that gives you some unique upgrades or texts that you can get from your church. Every European civ has that card available in different forms though. It's named something else and it gives them different benefits, different options. So for Dutch, the biggest benefit you're gonna get from that is the 5 red lancers. They've renamed them over the years in different patches, but they used to be called Stradiots. I don't know if Stradiots I think now exists in the game as well, but it's a different unit.
Correct, yeah.
Regardless, these are H3 heavy cavalry that do very well, especially against infantry, and it costs 1,000 coin. That's going to be utilized in quite a few of your games, and also in H4, I believe it's still 30 musketeers that cost 2,000 coin, which can be coupled with 2 heavy cannons if you happen to go for a fast industrial strategy, and can give you a huge military push at the instant that you decide to get both of those going. And there is another tech in there, and it's changed again over the years. It used to allow you to build 2 more banks and slow down your military units, but they did change that. I'm happy they did. I'm trying to recall what it does now. I think it
What
I would have
coffee
to
trade?
double check on that. Yeah, coffee trade.
Yeah, I think it increases the bank limit again, and then I forget what the
Okay.
negative it does though.
I believe it reduces their HP instead of reducing your military speed, which
Okay.
I think is a really good change.
Okay. Yeah, we'll take a look at the bonus. We'll try to send this and we'll kind of show the text when we're in the skirmish. But okay, so good to have this, just to kind of have a little bit more oomph to your deck, and then we can talk about timing. Exactly. Well, actually, let's ask you now. When do you feel like sending this in? It seems like it's kind of weird. It's not like the Brits where they kind of time everything around the Highlanders now with the GMT build, or it's not like some FI Russia builds where you can get the counter dragoons and things like that. So when do you when you're feeling out a game in a semi-FF kind of manner, when are you thinking like in your head like, okay, I really need some Red Lancers, or I want to have this in because it kind of slows the tempo a little bit?
Yeah, so it can be used in a few different ways. One of the most common, I would say, is if you're being rushed, you're kind of going with zero military FF. You don't have anything to support your villagers or your Minutemen, whatever you might have. And so you can pop those guys if you're, for example, getting rushed by Russia, the Russian civilization, and you just need some units to breathe, to just get some room and breathe. And also, if you can get up to H3 quick enough and get them out on the map when your opponent doesn't have any military, just to do some raiding, which can then sometimes lead to you going for a fast industrial, and those guys basically will buy you time while you get there, and then again you can go for that very common musketeer pop with the heavy cannons. But yeah, like you said, and it's also good later in the game, like say you're in H3 and you've been there for a while, you're running out of cards to send. You can send that, get those Red Lancers out there to help really strengthen your next push.
Okay, awesome. Anything else in H2?
Yeah, in H2 you also frequently will want your infantry combat cards, which will be the infantry attack and infantry HP. And this one is a bit situational and depending how you want to play, but also advanced arsenal is a really good card to have if you think you're going to be making a lot of skirmishers. So it gives you additional HP upgrades, attack upgrades, and speed upgrades, as well as some other ones. But that, like I said, that's going to be pretty matchup dependent. But I like to have that in a lot of decks, especially versus civs like Ottoman or India, where you expect a lot of Janissaries or Sepoy.
Okay, gotcha. So this H2 is I have a question, because this H2 is kind of reminding me a little bit of Germany in the sense that I don't have a musketeer shipment. So what's up with that?
Yeah, so Dutch is one of the civs that do not have musketeers available in the second and third age. Like I said, you can get them from the unique church card in the fourth age, and I think a lot of those cards have been changed where it allows you to train them. I don't know if that's the case with this with this card
From the forts, yeah.
but yeah, they're one of the few civs. Yeah, they're one of the few civs that do not have musketeers available early in the game.
Okay, so anti-cav is kind of important in H2, right? In H3 they'll get a dragoon. We'll talk about that, but in H2, like a cav start against you is kind of rough.
Yeah, and that's why those 8 pikemen are so important, because like you said, there's no anti-cav. You have Huss, which can be really useful and serve as a meat shield for your skirmishers to fire from behind. But a lot of times those 8 pikemen are super necessary. So
Gotcha.
yeah, one of my favorite cards to send is Dutch, or at least queue up as Dutch.
So I know you'll probably say it's situational, but I still want to get your thoughts on this card here, the Valgelders.
Yeah, I've seen that used a few times. Swiss pikemen, I actually like them more than most people, because when I've seen some mercenary ratings, like what do you call it, tier list, they put them pretty low, but they're all about getting into position. So if you can get into combat with some units, they do a ton of damage, have a lot of HP, but because they're heavy infantry, the most common unit in the game on the field, and most times is a light infantry unit, so they're typically easily countered. Um, I just don't think that's a great card in H2. You're spending not only your shipment, but also 500 coin for it. And the whole idea with Dutch is typically to get up to H3 quickly. So you don't want to spend the resources and time and card on another H2 shipment. So my preference is to just skip that.
Gotcha. All right, cool. Just thought I would get your thoughts on that one while I have you here. And okay, cool. So you can probably point out plenty of other optional cards, but so far this is what you would say standard H2.
Yeah, and I think Dutch is pretty much like gonna be the same in most of your decks in H2. Obviously, water maps might change that, or if you have some preferences for like some late game stuff with the faster training cavalry. But for the most part, I don't really see too many variations that make sense. Sometimes people like to add 700 food in there, or maybe a specific deck where there's not a lot of hunt. So that can be utilized sometimes too. But it's the value of that shipment is just not really there for me. I would almost rather. I mean, you could always buy food as Dutch, and it's actually something you do quite often. But it can be a viable card.
Gotcha. Okay, so let's go ahead and move right into the Fortress Age, and this is where you're saying where the magic happens, so to speak. So, what's going on here?
Yep. Yeah, so this is where Dutch shines, especially the early Fortress Age. The later they go, they lose a little bit of tempo. They might hit their villager limit. So the early H3 is what it's all about for them. Some very important cards are your 1,000 wood crates, your 1,000 coin crates. But there, in the military shipments, there's a lot of difference of opinion. It's kind of how I think it probably even has to do with your ranking. If there's not as much micro at your level, the halberdiers are probably much more valuable. But for me, the standard decks are gonna have the 8 skirm, 7 skirm, and 9 Reuter.
Okay.
And
so now that you brought them up, before you start talking about other cards, I want to ask you,
sure,
what the heck is a Reuter?
So it is a anti-cavalry unit, which is very similar to the dragoon or the cavalry archer. The difference between cavalry archers and Reuters are the rate of fire and the type of armor they have. So Reuters resist ranged damage, and they're very low cost, especially food. So they work really well with the Dutch economy, and you can really get quite a few of them out on the map, which is why you get 9 of them. That because of the low cost, you get 9 of them with your shipment, where other civs typically get only 5 dragoons.
Okay, so does that mean that they're not as strong then, in this case, as like a normal dragoon?
Yeah, they're not as strong. They're actually quite fragile, and they have lower attack, but they still do have very high multipliers versus cavalry, so they're still very effective. But they're best when they are in a large mass. So you can get sometimes up to like 50 or more of them.
Oof. Okay, cool. So these are your dragoon units, and they're not as strong, but they mass really, really well. And they have that really cool formation that they get into where they're super tight, which is kind of nice for the micro. I don't know exactly why that is. I feel like that's just like some sort of like interaction with the game that they just never bothered to patch out, and they just call it a bonus. But
yeah, they do seem to have a very small space that they take up on the map. I forget what the exact term for that is, but you can even put them in defend mode, which probably makes it even tighter.
Oof.
But yeah, sometimes it's not good, because if you get up against some splash units like Doppelsoldners or even just Falconets, they can go down pretty quickly.
Right. And then speaking of Falconets, they only have the 1 infinite shipment. They don't get 2 Falcs. Thoughts on why that is?
Yeah, it's also a unique thing about Dutch compared to the other European civs, is they do not have the 2 Falc shipment, and I think that's just kind of to like balance them out, because they do have the gold or the coin economy that helps spam artillery. For whatever reason, the devs decided not to give them that 2 Falconet shipment. But again, if you really like your artillery, you can drop down a artillery foundry and make a couple Falconets off the 1,000 coin shipment. or
Right.
even use the 1000 wood to help drop some houses and that foundation.
All right. Good to know. All right. What's next out of the 9? After the 9?
Let's take a look. Okay, so the other ones that we're missing are your very commonly sent cavalry combat, which will boost your Reuters and your Hussar, as well as your Red Lancers if you choose to get them out on the map. And infantry combat, which is a very good card if you're going for a skirmisher mass. This is one of the strengths that Dutch has in Age 3. In the early to mid Age 3, when you're able to send either or both of those upgrade cards, because you can then start adding in the Age 2 skirmisher cards, and you can really get some of the best skirmishers in the game.
Mm-hmm.
And
Sweet.
from here, I think you're pretty much filled out with your Age 3 shipments. I feel like it's not so many, but some people will add some of the mercs. Oh, I do typically have Swiss pikemen, like I said earlier. I do kind of like them.
Ooh,
Um,
that's
if
different.
you're going for, yeah. So if you're going for more of like a, sometimes I like the composition of skirmisher and hussar, and if you can, there's like some really good timings you can switch over to hand cavalry. So if you can get like a full batch of 5 Huss, send the 5 Huss. Oh, I forgot. Yeah, I don't have the 5 Hussar shipment in there. That's one you definitely want as well. So if you can time that and get veteran Hussar and send Cav combat, uh, if you get that situation where you're able to do that, you can have a nice switch on your opponent where he's not expecting cavalry, and you have quite a bit of them, and they're also very strong. So, but yeah, so that Swiss pikeman shipment can go with that pretty well, because you'll have the Huss at the front line that can kind of hide the Swiss pikemen, and if you can sneak the pike in there, they can really tear up the opponent's hand cavalry, and then your skirmishers can take care of the goons or the cap archers in the back.
Okay. So usually we see Bosniaks. So is your thought like, well, you get Red Lancers anyway and they become trainable, so why send Bosniaks?
Bosniaks is one of the units I haven't had too much experience with in DE, since they have only been introduced in the definitive edition. But the more I'm playing against them, I've been seeing them a lot. I think against Italians, they do seem quite good, and I think I might start putting that in there as well. Maybe in place of the Swiss Pike, or in this case, maybe the Advanced Arsenal.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm gonna check them out a little bit more. They do seem very strong.
Okay. And
But like you said, you have the option of getting the Red Lancers, so it's kind of whichever one you prefer. But the unique church card gives you a little bit more options for different points in the game as well.
Gotcha. So, and a couple other cards that I want to ask about is the fort card. Usually people say, well, as Dutch, you want to be defensive. You're going to turtle up a little bit more. So I'm guessing you're going to say this is situational to the deck to include a fort for the Dutch?
Yeah, and I would say situational, but I would also say just play style, like how you want to play the game. In almost all of my decks for every civ, I kind of let the fort. I just don't use it. My playstyle is aggressive, so again, that might just be preference. I don't think you really need it. I mean, you can build a nice tight base. You have your skirmishers from H2. You can get Reuters for cheap to help protect if your enemy's pushing in, and then you can always drop a artillery foundry and make some culverins if they're pushing with Falcons. So I don't really see it as super necessary. But if your play style is to be a little bit more defensive and try to be greedy and don't want to worry about your banks getting taken down, you can definitely add that.
Okay. And last question on Age 3 is the Nassau Regiment. So this is where the one shipment basically of making the Blue Guard available. I'm guessing this is very playstyle specific to send this. Do you end up using the Blue Guards? Do you like this card?
That's a card I'm not a fan of. At this point in the game's life, halberdiers are actually quite strong. So it's nice in certain situations when you expect your opponent to switch it to some hand cab, to just make a batch or two of them. and then you can even add the 8 in there if you like. Um, for me, I just, especially in age 3, I'm not a fan of musketeers. I'm also tend to lean towards the skirmisher and dragoon or reuter composition. So
Hmm.
when I see musketeers, I'm pretty happy about it because I can just kind of shoot and hit and run away, and not get into, because their range is just much lower. So yeah, it's not my favorite type of unit in the mid game.
Yeah, fair enough, fair enough. And any thoughts on like like a mercenary play, Dutch States Army, where you can do all the merc stuff and you get access to, oh, what is that? I think it's Highlanders, and you also get Royal Horsemen and all that kind of stuff. I don't know if you've ever played with that any.
I haven't played too much with mercenaries, but it is definitely something that would synergize quite well with Dutch. Um, you can. There's a bunch of options there, and then of course you can have the reduced cost for the shipments. But for me, again, playstyle wise, you don't typically have a trade post as Dutch, so all your shipments kind of are a little bit more valuable or important. So if you're missing some of the big ones, like if you need a couple more banks to get to the limit, 1,000 wood is super important early in Fortress. 1,000 coin if it can be as well if you really need to get a lot of units out. And then if you're taking a lot of pressure, the Reuter or the skirmishers are very important as well. So for me, tempo wise, I think Dutch just wants to have certain cards in the early Fortress Age.
Okay.
But again, you can always have a deck where you're having fun and just making pure mercenaries, and just go wild with that. It's always a good time.
Okay, good to know. All right, so this is so halberdiers are definitely optional, as he said, but this is basically stock standard, especially if you're going to go skirm goon combination. This is how you would do it with the option to switch up. However, you did say that you like skirmisher hussar, which I think is starting to become a little bit more popular nowadays. Pretty good combination, but we can go ahead and move into the age 4, and so that leaves us 3 cards left. So what are we looking at?
So of course you always want your 2 factories in case you do go to the late game. And then you also want your 2 heavy cannons, which I mentioned a few times earlier, you'll use quite often with some of your musketeers from the church if you go with that option. Now this is where you can, again, play style oriented, how you think the game's going to go, and then civ dependent. It's good to have at least 1 military shipment in H4, just so you don't lose out on a ton of value if you happen to get there and you're in the industrial age against your opponent for a while. Especially nowadays, where it seems like a lot of decks are catered to industrial age. So from here, my first cards that I would remove if I wanted to would be those first age 1 cards, the Bank of Amsterdam and Rotterdam.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can add in, it depends what you typically like to do in Fortress, but I would like to have the 17 Reuters as one of my cards, and then the bank boosting card, I forget exactly
Tulip
what it's called.
speculation.
Yeah, that's a very important card as well. 25% boost to banks.
Huge.
And of course, if you plan to play more industrial focused, there's a lot of good cards you can add in here. That's why I think it's important, if you're a beginner especially, is to have a game plan when you're going into the game. So you want to have a few different decks that give you options, and based on your opponent, based on the map, based on basically how you're feeling, what kind of game you want to play. You want to have a few different decks with all types of cards, so that if you want to just go industrial, you can have 3 or 4 military shipments there. But for your standard play, I think this is pretty much where you want to be at with your deck.
Okay, so we can leave out the 2 if we want to, but you can always feel free, guys, to mix it up if you want to. Like you said, there's create as many decks as you want, or for a standard, just know that you can either screen cap this. This is it gives you some age 4 options, and then, or you can go ahead and switch up. You can add these. I guess the question is for you is that this allows you to get an extra 2 banks and 10 villagers, right? Which is, I mean, a pretty substantial. I mean, obviously you have to send 2 cards to do that, but that's pretty substantial versus tulip speculation. How do you feel about tulip speculation in Age 4 versus, these 2 cards?
Well, I believe you can already get up to 7 banks without those 2 H1 cards. So, I mean, again, it's preference. I haven't run the numbers on that to see if it's actually more worth it to have one of those H1 cards. But what you're kind of asking about is trading out Tulip for what would be 2 cards. So, you could. I think Tulip is a good card to have there, especially if you do have more banks. So if you wanted to have those Bank of Rotterdam or Amsterdam or both, it would make me want to have Tulip even more.
I see. Okay.
Oh, and a quick little tip here. I believe this is gonna work. If you save that deck and then you click off of it to go to another deck and then come back, it should reorder the cards appropriately. Yeah.
Yeah, there we go.
So that's how it'll show up in game.
Okay.
There's like a certain card order that's assigned based on where it is in the home city, but yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, so let's go ahead and do this then. We'll just leave it like that. But this is your, at least one of, but definitely a more standard land deck for the Dutch. So again, guys, if the variations you probably could have, taken screenshots, feel free to rewind the video, take a look. But this is coming from the man himself. This is if you guys have ever read Nietzsche, Zarathustra coming down from the mountain to teach the people in the village. This is us learning how to play Dutch. So here you go. And then I have to ask, how would I kind of form fit this to be a water deck, in which I have the option for water play as needed. Not necessarily like a full water deck, just because I feel like new players are kind of overwhelmed by, going water. So if I needed the water option, how would you add that?
Yeah, so I have a few water decks that I typically go with. I would first save that, copy it, and then subtract from there. That's usually the easiest way to make a deck. Is you build your standard one first, and then you copy it, rename it for water or whatever you want to call it, and then just punch out the ones that you feel are least useful, and then add in a couple. So for your standard water play, I think I have a deck that's called Ponds, which is where you can ship military ships with the flag in the water. But I'm not super focused on fishing or 100% wanting to win water. It's just kind of like something to slow down your opponent if they are going fishing.
Right.
So those 2 cards that I would want to add in would be 2 Well, actually, it depends on how you're gonna play it. If you're gonna go H2 or H3, but 2 of the stronger cards are the Frigate in H3 and the 3. I believe they're galley.
The fleets.
Yes, exactly. So to get those in your deck, I would typically punch out the Advanced Arsenal card and the Swiss Pike.
Okay, cool.
Oh, you need to. Does it fit? Oh, okay, yeah. I didn't see it appear there. Okay. Yeah. So again, as Dutch, you're anticipating spending a lot of your time in H3. So the 2 caravels in H2 can be useful, but again, you want to get up to H3 at a pretty quick pace. And those 3 Floyds are super strong, super annoying for your opponent to deal with. So yeah, those are really good to harass your opponent's fishing.
Okay, and so the Floyd is basically just a better galleon, essentially, is a way to think about it.
Right. It's kind of, I look at it as in between a galley and a galleon. So the galley is the stronger attacking H2 ship. The galleon is one that tanks more from buildings and can allow your galleys to just take down the outposts or TC or fishing boats or whatever.
Okay, got it. So it's a nice little cross between. So having both these, so just get up to H3, and then you want to harass your opponent, and then have these on the water, so that way you can contest. And this doesn't stop you from, you have wood options here in H2 where you can, if you want to make a dock, you can put it down and put fishing boats. But that's probably that's going to be a different question in general, I think, in order to have that in the deck.
Yeah, I think with Dutch, it's pretty uncommon to make fishing boats, or even do H2 pressure with some galleys. I think because you want all that card value in H3, you just want to get there, and then and usually you can get there faster than your opponent and get down the boats faster than they can.
Okay, good to know. So, we had it up earlier. I put it back up. Go ahead and take a screenshot. This is a sort of anti-water deck, let's call it, where you have options to play on it. And the Floats are a great card that, as said, that can help take down buildings, and then you can train some units out of it if needed. So just a really great option to have, but you still want to focus on getting up to H3. So take a screenshot of that as you see fit, and I'm going to go ahead and put these cards back in. And so let's go ahead and talk about what my opening is going to be. So before we get into the skirmish match, what is my card order here?
So your card order is a little bit civ dependent on your opponent, but in most cases, ideal situation, you're going to go the 3 villagers in H1, and your first H2 shipment will be 700 wood, and you'll follow that up with 1 bank. And that's usually, you can kind of plan on that almost regardless of what your opponent's doing, and then from there you'll start to change your game plan based on what you're seeing on the map.
Okay. When do we send 1 bank wagon first? I know that's sometimes that, I've seen it.
Yep. So if you're trying to get some cavalry out, some hussar out very early on, the only way you can do that is if you send the bank wagon first. And it doesn't really slow you down all that much because it gives you so much XP. So it's actually a pretty good option. Or if you want to get some skirmishers out to defend a Russia push, that's also a good option, because the whole idea behind the 700 wood is you want to drop another bank or 2 with it. So if your villagers are going to be in the TC and they're not going to be able to gather those crates, you're just better off having that bank wagon.
Okay.
So that's just kind of what you're expecting from your opponent. It's also in a lot of situations against India, if you see an aggro fort rush, just drop that bank wagon, get it down, you got that income rolling, and then you can very soon after send 700 wood.
Okay, good to know. So everybody listening, you have a few little options, little flexibility in terms of picking which one to send first. But as he said, 3 vills, 700 wood, bank wagon, and then go from there. So let's jump into it. You give me your coaching. Oh no, shows you that I haven't played. I don't know this guy. That's fine. I'm never going to change my PFP. So let's go ahead and get into a skirmish. And so from here, let's just go ahead. I think standard maps is going to be fine. We'll see what it gives us. So obviously I've played a lot of Dutch, but that's fine. You're just going to coach me through an opening build order, and we're going to see what happens here. And we'll just talk through, and then if you ever need me to pause or we need to explain something, and we'll kind of go over looking at, the church card and all those kinds of things as well that we mentioned. But you're just going to coach me through just a standard opening build order here.
All right, sounds good.
So we're going to go easy. I'm not going to collect too many treasures, if any, just because I don't want to mess with the XP, and I want to be honed in on, what you're telling me to do. So let's go ahead and get started.
Yep. So as you start out, you want to spread your villagers out on the coin crates. You try not to tell them all to go onto one, because then they bump around a little bit. Mm-hmm. But as soon as you get enough coin, you're queuing up a villager, and you're sending a villager through the TC or around the TC, whichever you're able to do, mm-hmm. and start herding that hunt. Okay. And the general idea is to leave 100 wood on the floor if you can.
Yeah.
If not, that's totally fine. And put 3 merchants on coin and the rest on food.
Okay.
And those 3 will be your only coin gathering villagers for age 1, for the entire age 1. And you're gonna look to drop a house, and eventually you're gonna have 12 population queued up,
Would you like to
and
share
you're gonna
your
send
food with
3 villagers.
your men?
Yeah, go ahead and explore a little bit with your envoy.
Okay,
So there is
so
a bit to do early in Age 1. For me, the most important things are just getting the villagers tasked to the correct resources. But yeah, definitely a lot to explore with 2 exploring units.
okay, so
All
we're
right,
looking
so
at for
we're
that
looking
12
pretty good right now.
population, and then when do I want to herd in that next herd? Because you did talk about the importance of that second herd.
Yeah, that is important, but it's not so important as to try to get your quickest age up time. So we'll worry about that once we get our villagers queued for this next one. You're at 40 coin right now, so I'm always watching my coin value here
Okay.
because you want to switch off of those 3 villagers off of coin as soon as you get that next 100, and then you can go ahead and pick your deck. In the meantime. All right, so with those 3 villagers, when you're able to send that next shipment, that'll put you at 15 pop, which is the target you want to hit. So watch those 3 at coin. Yep. All right, switch them off, and then queue up another one, and then you want to herd in that bison, your starting bison that's trilling out a little bit to the bottom of the map. And herding is basically, if you don't know that yet, you're just getting behind it and shooting the direction you shoot. The hunt or the deer or the bison, whatever it is, will run the opposite direction. So that is a skill you're going to need to master early in your Dutch career if you want to be successful.
And an envoy is just a guy, right? He's just like a scout guy, a little bit slower.
Yep. Yeah, he's a little bit slower. He has a large line of sight. He has a very small attack, but a decent HP. So you don't typically want to fight against other exploring units like the native scout or other heroes. Yeah, go ahead and age up with 400 wood.
Okay.
Should have mentioned that, but and at this point your goal is to make a bank, right? So you don't want to have too many on food. You want to start switching off to wood.
Okay.
The ratio is typically, I believe, 6 and 9, but it depends on your treasures, depends on your age 1. Oh, your game was freezing there for a
Oh
second.
yeah,
I
for a
don't know if
while.
you-
Yeah, it's having a good time. Yeah, so
Okay.
let's do that split. But yeah, like you said, it's going to be dependent upon, like, if I get a ton of, if I get a lot of food treasures, if I get a lot of wood treasures, we're gonna have to.
Oh, you're breaking up a little bit.
Oh, okay. That if we get a lot of food
Okay,
treasures,
I hear you again. I hear you now.
Perfect. Then that means we'll just have to do less, but it's 350, right? So that's what we're aiming for.
Exactly. So your next 2 goals are to get the 350, drop that bank with 3 or 4 villagers. Depends how many you have around a tree. If you have 3, that's fine. 4 is preferred. And as soon as you drop that, you want to put the majority of your villagers back on coin so that you can queue up another villager. And yes, at this point, you definitely want to start herding. You want to use your explorer to find your second and third hunt, because there usually is one on each side of your town center. And the technique with herding is that every 10 seconds, you can drop your bank now. Every 10 seconds, you can shoot again at the deer so that they'll move. So yeah, you want to put about at least 8 villagers on coin here.
Okay.
Because it's
That is
the
including
goal
those on
to
the bank?
not have any item. Yep.
Okay.
You have a few more over there, and then you can herd with your villager up there at the top.
All praise given. Your civilization is
There you
indeed
go.
magnificent.
Yeah. So then we had that idle TC time that we were trying to avoid, but
Yeah, but if you don't get any treasures, it's difficult. Treasures, especially the coin ones at the start, really help you out, because every little bit that comes in allows you to move those villagers off of coin sooner so that you can gather more food, and then you're aging up faster. It's just a big snowball. So if you can get coin treasures, they're almost probably more valuable than food early in the game.
okay. And then with that 400
Alright.
wood, what am I wanting to do? A house, another bank?
Yeah, so at this point you can queue up your villagers, switch them off coin because you have enough stockpile to queue villagers for quite a while off of your banks.
Okay.
And then you're stockpiling food. Your wood is coming in. You drop banks as soon as you can.
Okay. So we want to put down another bank at this point because we have it.
Yep.
Okay.
Exactly.
So do I use like 3 vills or 4 vills for that?
3 vills is fine.
Okay.
All right, and you can also, with your 700 wood coming in, you could drop a stable
Ja,
and a house.
Timmerman. Hallo?
And just a little tip here for anybody that's, whether you're new or maybe you already know this, but if your efficiency of building is best when you have just one villager. It's diminished returns when you use more than one villager. So just a little tip that helps you out just a little bit. And then yes, you have your bank wagon coming in here. You have enough resources to drop another bank as well.
Okay, good to know.
Right, and as soon as that bank foundation is placed, you can queue up Hussar, and that'll get you going to be able to start harassing your opponent. So this is the 4 bank opening, which is my favorite. 5 banks is a little bit greedy sometimes. You can typically expect some pressure before you're able to get that down, and then you also don't have any military coming out anytime soon. So at this point, this is pretty much your opening that you're aiming for. 7 minutes is a little bit late, but if you're not familiar with the civ, it's totally fine. 700 coin is a perfect shipment to send here. You can queue up one more Hussar, drop a house, and then start queuing vills again.
Oh, I see. I got pops.
And
But
there you
at
go.
this point,
So
we
you
want to
have-
harass them. And against China, of course, they're going to struggle into the hand cap. So we're going to just go ahead and harass there.
Yep. So this is pretty much your goal, around the 7-minute mark, to have 4 banks, 5 Huss on the map, and be on your way towards the Fortress Age.
Okay. So you do send
So I don't know
700
if you
coin.
play. I don't know if you play a lot of Dutch, but you're doing pretty good here. And you said 1300 yellow, so yeah, looking pretty good.
Hey, you know what? I'll take it. Everybody heard it. SoldieR said I'm doing pretty good here. That's more than my mom ever told me. So that's good.
Yeah, I mean, the more you practice the build order, it gets a lot more comfortable, and then you can sometimes add in some little things like a market. If you get some good treasures, hunting dogs is always very nice, because as you see at this point, you have almost all your villagers on food. So if you're able to squeeze in hunting dogs, it's always super helpful.
Right. So do I want to go ahead and start chopping for wood for that, or do I?
Oh, right now you're focused on gathering the food for your age up, and then again, it's like with Dutch, every time you age up, you're kind of switching your economy a little bit for the next phase.
Okay.
So you go ahead and age up with the exiled prince for your fast age up,
Okay.
and now you can start switching villagers over to wood, because you want to think about what infrastructure you're going to want to have against your opponent. So in this case, we'll say it's China. So you want to add in definitely some Reuters and some skirmishers. So you want to first prioritize your market, and with your market, you're going to be able to, with all this excess coin, you're going to be able to buy wood, get your hunting dogs, drop a barracks, which is what you're going to want to do very soon after the market is completed, just so you have both the stable and the barracks. And this is very situational. Your first card in H3 is very situational. So in a situation where your opponent's not pressuring you, I would go for 1000 wood as my first shipment. Drop your 5th bank, drop a 3rd military building, and then a lot of times it's really nice to follow that up with 1000 coin. You would have at that point 3 military buildings, a lot of coin coming in. With the 1000 wood, you can get steel traps, and yeah, you can have your economy really in a good place.
Okay.
So I said a lot there, so we'll
Yeah.
just go little by little as we go. So you're sending skirmisher, which is fine if you want to put some military pressure on. Totally doable, not a bad decision. But yeah, skirmisher will often be a first card in H3 if you're feeling some pressure.
Okay. Got it. And then, or I can go wood.
Yep. Wood is, of course, the more economic approach.
Okay, but I can also feel free to buy wood. So if you're a market abuser, this is definitely the civ for you.
Yep.
And then,
And I'm not sure if it looked like you got hunting dogs, but you can also get steel traps. Notice there you are popped there, so
yeah, I got this guy
dropping a
going.
house. Yeah, that's one thing with Dutch, and that's why that 1,000 wood is so useful for them too.
Right.
Because you're not typically gathering a lot of wood, and you don't want to buy it the entire game. So it is a really nice card to have as one of your first H3 shipments. Oh, he stole the Chinese goat. Wow, that's not usually the case.
Okay, cool. So then we're sitting pretty at this point. And so when do I want to go for, I have a few questions. So when do I get another skirmisher? Or sorry, when do I open skirmishers is my first question. Ooh, that was a bad herd. When do I open skirmishers is my first question. And then when do I get my next bank, or is it just whenever I feel it?
How Tucker?
The next bank would typically come off of 1,000 wood. Because
Okay.
at some point, you're going to probably be able to send that. You usually will be in age 3 for a while. Or if you choose to go industrial, you're really looking for some tempo. So, for the case of making skirmisher early in the game, like I had mentioned a little bit earlier, if you're going up against Russia and you decide you want to fight it out on H2, you might want to start. You could do a very similar thing. When you drop the stable, you can drop the barracks, or in that case, I would typically go for the bank wagon first, the other
Okay.
build order that we were talking about.
Right.
This one is more so against civs that you think are going to have a little bit later timing, like French or Brits, and not feel the pressure before the 5:30 mark.
Gotcha. Good.
Yeah, I like the approach you're going with right here. It looks like I think I can read what you're going for. You're going to send the unique church card and potentially go up to industrial? Question mark.
Yeah, I want to show some of these texts off, assuming my game stops freezing at any point in time. But yeah, so I wanted to just show those church texts because we already got the opening build order down. So that's pretty good. I also wanted to kind of show off the fact. I wanted to ask those questions and show off the fact that the skirmishers are shadow tech. So you get skirmishers H2, but then you can still, yeah.
Yeah, so making skirm in H2 to help defend is really nice because you can also get a nice little timing there. If you have more than 10 of them, you can really get a power spike as soon as you age up and follow up with your military shipment if you choose to. But yeah, what you're doing here I think is a good approach. You can basically cancel your 2 villagers and head up to industrial, and then we can show that musketeer and heavy cannon composition that I was mentioned a few times earlier.
So there's those red lancers
Or
that
you
we're
can
talking about.
Yeah,
Right.
you can go ahead and set the red lancers right now if you want to.
And then you can also get coffee tree, which is the bank hit points, not your units, which is good. Okay. I guess just chest of 1,000
So
coin.
you see the utility from that card there is you see the coffee trade adds 2 banks to your build limit, which is basically replacing, not entirely, but for the most part, it replaces those 2 Age 1 cards, Bank of Rotterdam and Bank of Amsterdam. Of course, those 2 cards give you more room to train villagers, but the main benefit is 2 extra banks you can build.
So let's go ahead and send that just so we can start just popping more banks. Sounds good to me.
Yeah, and when you have, I mean, you already have 5 banks. You have a bunch of villagers on hunt with at least hunting dog, but possibly even steel traps, I think.
Yep.
The resources really flow in, and if you're new to Dutch and if you played other civs and you're able to get to this point, this is where it's very difficult to beat the civ, and you just like sometimes can have trouble queuing units from 2 barracks, and like you're just you might have like 15 or 20 units queued in a barracks just because your resources are coming in so quickly.
And if anybody's asking, like, oh, you didn't make any Reuter in this game, it's like, yeah, hand cav are really good against China, so that's probably why we make them. But obviously, just make your unit counters. If your opponent's going cav, then it's gonna behoove you to go Reuter. I don't think that doesn't bear much explanation, to be honest. So, hence the reason.
Yeah, you always gotta try to scout your opponent and read their composition and make the counters. It's kind of the main idea with the RTS games, and especially AoE 3.
But there are their stats. Let's go ahead and go Red Lancer here. I'm gonna go ahead and gather up that
and
coin.
you chose the age up politician, which I typically go for industrial as well. That's 1,000 coin crates, which help you. It all synergizes so well with the musketeers and heavy cannons composition, which you'll be able to achieve pretty soon. These guys are pretty sweet, aren't they?
They are pretty sweet. I like their look. And there's their stats, just in case you
and,
need
and
it.
take a look at their stats. Yeah, and they have an additional multiplier against infantry. It negates if you're fighting heavy infantry, but if you're going up against light infantry like skirmishers, they really do quite a bit of damage.
Okay, let's go ahead and send Tulip Speculation just for funsies. Usually would send the factory, but that's okay. We're just having a good time now. And then I'm going to go ahead and send the Blue Guard as soon as the coin is done, and then that will probably just conclude the skirmish, since apparently this is giving me a hard time.
Yep, but you can already see, look, in the parentheses there, it shows you your coin per minute.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that number is actually ridiculous. Per minute, over 2,500 gold, and that's without factories. So.
Yeah, it's pretty insane. But
and
yeah,
that's without Tulip. That Tulip's about to drop pretty soon too.
yeah, we'll take a look at what that gives us, and so we're gonna see these guys pop. So these are the Blue Guards. These are promotable muskets, but they basically have veteran stats, or maybe a little bit better. Yeah, they're a little bit better.
Yeah, 225 HP is very good. They also have 34 attack, and one of the big things with them is just the ability to pop them out of the TC at any given second, especially coupling them with heavy cannons. Very good composition, hard to defend, or hard to take down early, and because that strategy, if you're going for the fast industrial with the heavy cannons and muskets, your idea is to do it early in the game, where your opponent's not going to have the strongest units to take down heavy cannons.
Okay, got it. Okay, but primarily the composition, these are just fun little things. Primarily your composition is going to consist of more Reuter. You want to get your upgrades. You want to get the, infantry attack, your cav combat, really upgrade those. You're going to go Reuter, you're going to go Skirm, and then you're going to have Red Lancers, maybe some and your Hussar are going to kind of do your flanking motions, and among other things, and that's going to be the rounding out composition mainly. I'm guessing after, as you just kind of sit in H3 and battle it out with your opponent. And then if you get to H4, plenty of heavy cannon get thrown in there. So just a lot of, like you said, you can throw down the artillery foundry as well in H3, and your coin gathering will make you produce plenty of falconets. And you also mentioned 1,000 coin can get you there as well, in terms of producing lots of units instead of using it for an age up, right? So...
Yeah, right. So, I mean, it's a little bit sad they don't get the 2 Falconet shipment in H3, but 1,000 coin can go a long way towards getting your Falcons out there if you really want them.
Okay. But basically, that's pretty much it. So that you would call that just what, your standard 4-bank semi-FF, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yep, and you executed it pretty well. You get the 5 Huss out there to buy you some time. A lot of the idea with playing as Dutch is you want to keep your opponent away from your hunting villagers and keep your economy rolling. So just having some Huss out there to keep them distracted and keep their military out of your base, it goes a long way.
Gotcha. Okay, let's go ahead and we're gonna quit out of this. So that basically explains the opening. So if in case you needed that again, you can just go ahead and rewind that, and you can kind of see how we played it out, and just the kind of little macro little things that you need to know. I messed up a little bit. I gathered up that 100 wood early because and that's like a little inefficiency, just because that burns up some villager seconds. But other than that, just making sure that you're well macroed. Watch your treasures, watch the coin gathering, keep your herding tight. And you should be able to get those banks up. The key thing that I think you would agree with, SoldieR, is that, if you're learning this under pressure, if there's any sort of pressure from your opponent, making sure that you can get those banks down and that you can make it to H3.
Yep, exactly. You just got to read your opponent a little bit and react correctly. It might take some practice to know what's the best option, but really the idea is if you're going to be idled up in the TC, get that bank wagon shipment first, and then you can worry about getting your 3rd and 4th bank with the 700 wood.
All right, too easy. Well, hey, if listen, I can talk about Dutch with you all night. I really do love the Civ, and it's got plenty of flexibility, but just super fun in terms of the macro. It's so unique, so different, but like you said, maybe learn the game a little bit, and then when you approach Dutch, just know that it's going to be a different experience. But hey man, I really appreciate you coming out and speaking with me about this, and I know the community loves these videos, and hopefully it helps a prospective Dutch player in the future.
Oh yeah, for sure. I hope to see a lot of Dutch players out there. One of my favorite civs. Just kind of fell in love with it, and thanks for having me. I appreciate it. It's been fun.
Of course. So anyway, there will be a link for SoldieR's YouTube channel in the description, as well as his Twitch and his Discord. We'll have that all there for you in case you want to, kind of further discuss this or any other civs with him. I'm sure that he will be somewhat available. I don't know his schedule, but he'll try to. I'm sure he'll try his best, and he'll always appreciate the views. Again, if you're on our channel, you have most likely seen SoldieR's content. It's fantastic. Please go check it out. Definitely one of my favorite YouTubers, if not my favorite one right now in the game. And so I highly recommend it. And thank you so much again. And guys, we will see you in the next one.